The man who saw with sound. The bunker smelled of cigarette smoke, coffee, and fear. Lieutenant Marcus Webb sat at his radio station, headphones pressed against his ears, fingers dancing across the knobs with the precision of a concert pianist. Around him, officers huddled over maps under the harsh glow of overhead lamps, their voices tense as they coordinated the night's mission. But Marcus didn't need to see the maps. He didn't need to see anything at all. He had been blind since the age of 12, when a childhood accident had stolen his sight, but awakened something else entirely. Over the years, Marcus had developed an almost supernatural ability to understand the world through sound. Every frequency, every static crackle, every subtle shift in tone told him a story that others couldn't perceive. It was this gift that brought him here, to a secret RAF bunker beneath the cliffs of Dover on a cold November night in 1943. Commander Richardson approached, his heavy boots announcing his presence long before he spoke. Marcus had learned to identify every person in the bunker by their footsteps alone. Richardson's were authoritative, deliberate, carrying the weight of countless decisions that meant life or death. Webb, Richardson's voice was grave. We need you for something unprecedented. 20 Lancaster bombers are preparing for a raid on the Ruhr Valley. Intelligence suggests heavy cloud cover and possible equipment failure. We need someone who can guide them through hell using only radio communication. Someone who can hear what others cannot. Marcus felt his pulse quicken. 20 crews, perhaps 140 men, all depending on a blind man to bring them home. The irony wasn't lost on him, but neither was a responsibility. He had spent 3 years proving himself, first as an experimental recruit, then as the most accurate radio operator in the entire coastal defense network. But this was different. This was active combat guidance. When did they take off? Marcus asked, his hands already reaching for his equipment logs. 2 hours, Richardson replied. They're calling it Operation Phantom Wing. The Germans won't expect a raid in these conditions. But neither will our boys be able to see much once they're over enemy territory. You'll be their eyes, Webb. Their only eyes. Marcus nodded slowly. His world had always been darkness, but he had learned to paint pictures with sound. The deep rumble of aircraft engines told him altitude and speed. Radio interference patterns revealed weather conditions and terrain. Even the breathing patterns of stressed pilots came through in their voice transmissions, telling him when they were panicking, when they needed calm reassurance, when they were about to make a fatal mistake. As the bunker burst into organized chaos around him, Marcus closed his sightless eyes and began his preparations. He calibrated his equipment with a touch so delicate it seemed almost supernatural, adjusted frequencies with minute precision, and mentally mapped the route the bombers would take. In his mind's ear, he could already hear them. 20 metal birds screaming through night, their crews terrified and brave in equal measure, all trusting a man who had never seen an airplane, never seen the stars they would navigate by, never seen the faces of men whose lives hung in the balance. But Marcus Webb didn't need sight. He had something better, the ability to transform sound into salvation, to hear truth in the chaos of war, to guide others through darkness, because darkness was where it always lived, where it always thrived, where it had become something more than ordinary men could ever be. Tonight, he would prove that blindness was not a disability. It was a different way of seeing. And sometimes, in the depths of war's darkness, it was the only way that mattered. Wings in the night. The roar was magnificent. Even from the bunker, miles from the airfield, Marcus could hear them through his radio equipment. 20 Lancaster bombers, their Merlin engines creating a symphony of power that made the very air vibrate. Each aircraft had its own signature sound, subtle differences in engine pitch and propeller rhythm that Marcus had memorized during the pre-flight briefing. Phantom leader to control. All aircraft airborne, forming up at Angels 15. The voice belonged to Squadron Leader James Hartley, a veteran pilot with over 30 missions under his belt. Marcus had spent an hour with him earlier, learning the unique cadence of his voice, the slight Scottish burr that became more pronounced under stress. Control to Phantom Leader. We have you all on scope. Weather update. Cloud ceiling dropping to 8,000 feet. You'll be flying blind most of the way. Richardson's voice was steady, but Marcus heard the underlying tension. Even the commander was nervous about this mission. Marcus's fingers moved across his controls, switching between frequencies, monitoring each aircraft's radio signature. In his mind, he was building a three-dimensional map of sound, positioning each bomber by the strength and direction of their transmissions, cross-referencing with the radar data being called out by the operators around him. "This is Phantom Eye." Marcus spoke into his microphone, using his designated call sign. "I'm reading all 20 birds. Phantom 7, you're drifting left. Correct 2 degrees starboard." Phantom 7, correcting. "How the devil can you tell?" The pilot's voice carried genuine curiosity. "Your engine note shifted. Crosswind from the northwest is catching your port side." Marcus smiled slightly. He could hear the wind, actually hear it in the subtle variations in engine sound as it buffeted the aircraft. The formation crossed the English Channel, and Marcus tracked their progress by the changing acoustic properties of their transmissions. Over water, radio signals behaved differently, carrying farther but with different interference patterns. He adjusted his mental map accordingly. Phantom Leader approaching enemy coast, going radio silent except for emergencies. Hartley's voice was calm, professional. This was the dangerous part. For the next hour, the bombers would maintain radio silence to avoid German detection. Marcus would have to track them using only passive listening, picking up the faint engine sounds, the occasional necessary transmission, the electromagnetic signatures of their equipment. The bunker fell into a tense quiet. Richardson stood behind Marcus, hands clasped behind his back. The radar operators whispered their readings. Marcus listened to nothing and everything at once. In the static of his headphones, he could hear them, the distant thunder of Merlin engines, growing fainter as they penetrated deeper into enemy territory. He adjusted his receiver, hunting for them across the frequencies like a bloodhound following a scent. Phantom 12 to I. Emergency. Port outer engine failure. Losing altitude. The voice crackled with static and barely controlled panic. Marcus's response was instant. His fingers flew across the controls, isolating Phantom 12 signal. He could hear it now, the asymmetric drone of 3 engines instead of 4, the struggling pitch as the bomber fought to maintain altitude on reduced power. Phantom 12, this is I. Reduce throttle on starboard outer to 60%. Trim for level flight. You can make it. Marcus kept his voice steady, authoritative. Panic was contagious over radio. Calm was 2. Roger. I. Reducing power. Trimming now. A pause. The engine sound stabilized in Marcus's headphones. Level flight achieved. Continuing mission. Richardson leaned close to Marcus's ear. How did you know the exact throttle setting? I could hear the imbalance, sir. The starboard engines were pulling too hard, creating a yaw. It's like listening to an orchestra when one violin is out of tune. You don't need to see it to know something's wrong. The night had only begun, and already Marcus had saved 1 crew. But ahead lay the target zone, the flak fields, the enemy fighters. The real test was still to come. And in the darkness of his world, Marcus Webb prepared himself for the symphony of war that only he could conduct. Into the fire, the static change. Marcus heard it before the radar operators, before the pilots themselves realized what was happening. The electromagnetic spectrum around the bomber formation had shifted, filling with the distinctive signatures of German early warning radar. They had been detected. Phantom Leader, this is I. You've been painted. Enemy radar at 270 degrees, approximately 40 kilometers. Recommend altitude change to confuse tracking. Marcus's fingers adjusted his receivers, searching for other threats in the radio landscape. Roger, I. All Phantoms, descend to Angels 12. Maintain formation. Hartley's voice remained steady, but Marcus could hear the increased tension in his breathing, transmitted clearly through the open microphone. Then the sky erupted. The flak started as a distant percussion, but Marcus heard it building, a deadly drumbeat that grew louder with each passing second. Anti-aircraft guns, dozens of them, opening fire on the bomber stream. The sound came through his headphones not as explosions, but as sharp electromagnetic pulses, each burst of flak creating a brief spike of radio interference. Flak, heavy flak. Multiple voices broke radio silence simultaneously. Professional discipline gave way to the primal need to warn others of danger. Marcus could hear the fear, could hear the mechanical shudder as shrapnel struck metal fuselages, could hear the changed engine notes as pilots threw their bombers into evasive maneuvers. All phantoms, this is I. The flak pattern suggests they're firing blind. The clouds are protecting you. Maintain current altitude and heading. Do not climb into clear air. Marcus's voice cut through the chaos like a knife. In his darkness, he could see the pattern that the pilots, focused on their instruments and the explosions around them, could not. Phantom 4 hit. Phantom 4 hit. Port wing damage. Losing fuel. The transmission was clipped. Professional despite the crisis. Marcus immediately located Phantom 4 in his mental map. He could hear the change in engine sound, the asymmetric note that indicated damage. But more importantly, he could hear something the pilot couldn't see in the chaos. The fuel wasn't streaming back along the fuselage. It was venting upward, quickly dissipating in the slipstream. Phantom 4, your fuel leak is minimal. Upper wing surface only. You're venting to atmosphere, not leaving a trail. You can complete the mission. Marcus spoke with absolute confidence, and he heard the pilot's breathing steady. How can you possibly know that? I can hear your engines. If fuel was streaming back, it would be affecting your tail surfaces, changing the sound of your control inputs. You're flying clean. Trust me. A pause. Then, Roger, continuing mission. The flak intensified. Marcus counted the batteries by their firing signatures. 8 heavy guns to the west, 6 more to the north, a lighter concentration to the south. In his mind, he built a 3-dimensional map of death, a sonic landscape of exploding shells and searching searchlights that he could navigate better than anyone with sight. Phantom leader. Adjust heading to 045 degrees. There's a gap in the flak coverage. 30-degree corridor. You have 60 seconds to reach it. Marcus had found in the pattern a blind spot in the German defenses where the gun batteries' fields of fire didn't overlap. All phantoms come to 045. Follow my lead. Hartley didn't question the blind man's instructions. He had learned to trust that voice in the darkness. The formation wheeled, 20 heavy bombers turning as one, threading through the gap that Marcus had heard in the chaos. The flak fell away behind them, and for a moment, there was only the steady drone of engines and the whisper of static. In the bunker, Richardson exhaled slowly. That was impossible. He guided them through by sound alone. One of the junior officers spoke up, awe in his voice. Sir, he can't see the radar. He's not looking at any of our scopes. He's doing it purely by listening to the radios. I know, Richardson replied quietly. I know, but Marcus wasn't paying attention to the amazement of those around him. His focus was absolute, his entire being concentrated on the sounds in his headphones. Because ahead lay the target, and with it, the most dangerous part of the mission, the bomb run, where the aircraft would have to fly straight and level, vulnerable to every gun in the valley. And somewhere in that electronic wilderness, he had just detected a new sound, a sound that made his blood run cold. The high-pitched whine of German night fighter radios. The hunters had found the bomber stream. The hunter and the hunted. Phantom leader, this is contact. Enemy night fighters, bearing 290. Angels 14, closing fast. For aircraft, possibly Messerschmitt 110s based on engine signature. Marcus's voice was urgent but controlled. His fingers flew across the radio dials, tracking the approaching threat through their radio transmissions and engine sounds. The response was immediate. Gun turrets whirred to life across the bomber formation. Rear gunners called out positions. The professional calm of the mission gave way to the heightened alertness of prey that knows the predator is near. Marcus listened to the German fighters with the intensity of a man whose life depended on understanding every nuance. Their radios crackled with communication, and though he didn't speak German fluently, he didn't need to. The tone, the urgency, the patterns told him everything. They were coordinating an attack, coming in from the high port quarter, using the cloud cover to mask their approach until the last moment. Phantom 17, break left now. Fighter on your 6. Marcus shouted the warning a split second before the rear gunner even saw the threat. The bomber peeled away, cannon fire slashing through the space where it had been. "How did you—" Phantom 17's pilot began, but Marcus cut him off. "No time. Phantom 9, dive 300 feet. Phantom 3, climb 200. They're trying to bracket you." Marcus was tracking all 4 fighters simultaneously now. Their engine notes distinct as ears, their tactics clear from the way they moved through the radio spectrum. The night sky became a 3-dimensional chess game played at 300 miles per hour. Marcus called out maneuvers, warned of attacks, guided the bombers away from danger with a prescience that seemed supernatural. But it wasn't supernatural. It was simply a man who had learned to see with different eyes, to read the story written in sound waves and radio frequencies. Phantom leader, the fighters are reforming. They're going to try a frontal attack on the lead elements. When I give the word, drop 1,000 feet. All aircraft, synchronized drop. Marcus had heard the change in the German tactics. The way their radio chatter had shifted to a new attack pattern. Standing by, Hartley's trust was absolute now. The squadron leader had flown through hell and back, but he had never encountered anything like this blind oracle who could see the battle that he could not. Marcus counted in his head, tracking the fighters by sound, calculating their closure rate, their angle of attack, the precise moment when they would commit to their firing run. 3, 2, 1, drop now. Drop now. 20 bombers dropped as one, a coordinated dive that left the German fighters firing at empty air. The Messerschmitt screamed past overhead, their cannon shells finding nothing but clouds and darkness. Level out at Angels 12. They won't expect you to climb back up immediately. You'll pass underneath them as they turn. Marcus was already 3 moves ahead, hearing the battle's rhythm like a musical score. The bombers climbed back to altitude, and Marcus heard the German fighters' confusion in their radio chatter. They had lost contact, lost their targets in clouds. The hunter had become the hunted, and they didn't even understand how. Phantom, this is Phantom 6. I don't know how you're doing this, but you just saved my life, my whole crew's lives. The pilot's voice was thick with emotion. Save the gratitude for after the mission. Phantom 6. We're approaching the target area. Time to earn our pay. But Marcus allowed himself a small smile. He had been told his entire life what he couldn't do, what his blindness made impossible. But here, in the darkness of war, he was doing impossible with every breath, every decision, every word. The target lay ahead. The industrial complex of the Ruhr Valley, Germany's heartland of steel and munitions. This was what they had come for, what they had risked everything for. But the German defenses had been alerted. Every gun in the valley would be waiting for them. The night fighters were still out there, regrouping, preparing for another attack. And Marcus Webb, who had never seen a bomb fall, who had never seen the destruction of war, would have to guide 20 bombers through the most heavily defended airspace in Europe. He adjusted his headphones, checked his equipment one final time, and prepared for the moment when everything would hang in the balance. The moment when sound would become salvation, and a blind man would have to see clearer than anyone ever had before. The moment of truth. Phantom leader, beginning bomb run, all aircraft on my mark. Squadron leader Hartley's voice was steady, but Marcus could hear the elevated heart rate in his breathing. The bomb run was the most vulnerable moment of any mission. For 2 minutes, the bombers would have to fly straight and level while the bombardiers aligned their sights. 2 minutes of being perfect targets. The valley below erupted. Every anti-aircraft gun opened fire simultaneously, filling the sky with a curtain of steel. Searchlights stabbed upward, trying to pin the bombers in their beams. Marcus heard it all in layers. The deep bass of heavy flak, the staccato rhythm of lighter guns, the electromagnetic pulses of radar-guided batteries, the drone of the bombers holding formation despite the hell around them. But Marcus heard something else too, something that made his tactical sense tingle. The flak pattern wasn't random. It was predictive, anticipatory. The Germans were using their radar to calculate where the bombers would be, filling those positions with explosive shells. Traditional evasive maneuvers wouldn't work because the enemy was predicting them. All Phantoms hold current altitude and heading. Do not, I repeat, do not take evasive action. Marcus's command was counterintuitive, against every instinct of self-preservation. In the bunker, Richardson looked at him with alarm. "Aye, that's suicide. They're bracketing us," one of the pilots protested, his voice cracking with stress. "Trust me, they're predicting your moves. The flak is where they think you'll be, not where you are. Bombardiers, on target in 30 seconds. Hold steady." Marcus's voice carried absolute conviction. He could hear it in the timing of the flak bursts, in the radar patterns. The Germans were firing at Ghosts, at where maneuvering bomber formation should be. By staying steady, the Phantoms were flying through the gaps in the barrage. Seconds stretched into eternities. Marcus tracked each bomber by sound, heard the bomb bay doors opening, heard the slight change in engine note as tons of high explosives dropped away. 20 aircraft, executing their mission with parade ground precision while death blossomed around them. Bombs away. Bombs away. The calls came in rapid succession. Phantom 1 through 20, each bombardier reporting success. The mission objective had been achieved. Now came the hardest part, getting home. All Phantoms, break formation. Disperse on individual headings. I will vector each of you home separately. The Germans are tracking the formation, not individual aircraft. Split up, and they'll lose you. Marcus was already calculating 20 different routes home, 20 different paths to the defenses. The formation scattered like a startled flock of birds. Marcus's fingers danced across his controls, isolating each aircraft, giving each pilot individual instructions. Phantom 3, come to heading 285, descend to Angels 10. Phantom 7, maintain current heading but climb to Angels 16. Phantom 12, that engine's running rough, reduce speed to 190, head 290. It was impossible. No human being could track 20 aircraft simultaneously, giving each one individual attention, adjusting for their specific situations and limitations. But Marcus wasn't using his eyes or even traditional radio technique. He was using something deeper, more fundamental. He was feeling the aircraft through sound, understanding their needs through the subtle variations in engine tone, radio carrier wave, even the stress levels in the pilots' voices. The night fighters returned, but without the concentrated target of a formation, they were lost. Marcus heard them searching, heard their frustration in the clipped German radio transmissions. He vectored his bombers away from the hunters, threading them through the searchlight beams, guiding them along paths where the flak was thinnest. Phantom 15, you have a fighter at 7 o'clock high, 3,000 meters. Come right to heading 300, descend 400 feet. He won't follow into the valley. Marcus had heard the Messerschmitt banking to follow Phantom 15, but had also heard something the German pilot had missed. The acoustic signature of a narrow valley ahead where a heavy bomber could maneuver, but a fighter would struggle. Roger. Aye. Braking right, descending. The pilot followed instructions without question now. That trust had been earned through the night, proven again and again. One by one, Marcus guided his flock westward. Each aircraft presented unique challenges. Phantom 4 with its fuel leak required a lower altitude and careful fuel management. Phantom 12 with its failed engine needed constant speed adjustments. Phantom 8 had a wounded gunner and needed the smoothest possible flight path. Marcus remembered them all, adjusted them all, guided them all. Hours passed. The German border fell behind. The English Channel opened up before them, its distinctive acoustic signature welcoming the bombers home. Marcus allowed himself a moment to breathe, but only a moment. They weren't safe yet. Damaged aircraft, exhausted crews, fuel running low. The mission wasn't over until all 20 birds were on the ground. Phantom leader to I. We have the English coast. You did it. You brought us all home. Hartley's voice carried exhaustion and wonder in equal measure. Every single one of us. I don't know how, but you did it. Marcus smiled in the darkness of his world. Just doing my job, Phantom leader. Just doing my job. The light in the darkness. Dawn was breaking over Dover when the last Lancaster touched down. Marcus heard it all through his radio equipment. The squeal of tires on runway, the relieved voices of ground crew, the engines finally powering down after hours of sustained operation. 20 bombers, 20 crews, Not a single loss. Commander Richardson's hand fell on Marcus's shoulder. I need to understand. How did you do it? How did you track 20 aircraft through a combat zone, coordinate their actions, predict enemy movements, all without seeing anything? Marcus removed his headphones. The sudden silence strange after hours of constant sound. Sir, I didn't do anything they couldn't do. I just used different tools. You see with your eyes. I see with my ears. You interpret visual data. I interpret acoustic data. The principles are the same. The processing is just different. No, Richardson shook his head. It's more than that. You heard things that weren't even in the radio transmissions. You knew about that fuel leak, the engine problems, the fighter positions before our radar even saw them. Marcus stood, feeling his way to the bunker exit with the ease of long practice. When you lose one sense, the others compensate. But it's more than just hearing becoming sharper. You learn to process information differently. I hear the harmonics, the overtones, the spaces between sounds. An engine running rough creates a specific frequency shift. Fuel venting changes the acoustic properties around an aircraft. Fighters maneuver and make their engines work harder, changing their radio signatures. It's all there if you know how to listen. They emerged into morning air. Marcus felt the sun on his face, heard the distant waves against the cliffs, smelled the salt and oil and aviation fuel that marked an operational airbase. Somewhere across the field, pilots were climbing down from their aircraft. Ground crew were examining damage. Mechanics were already at work on repairs. The sound of running feet announced visitors before they arrived. Marcus recognized squadron leader Hartley by his breathing pattern, rapid from exertion, but steady from training. The other voices were his crew, bombardier, navigator, wireless operator, gunners. All the men who had trusted a blind man to bring them through hell. Lieutenant Webb. Hartley's voice was formal, but emotion colored every word. I've flown 33 missions over enemy territory. I've faced flak, fighters, weather, and mechanical failures. Tonight was the first time I felt truly safe, because I knew someone was watching over us. Someone who could see what we couldn't. Marcus felt his face flush. Sir, I was just doing my duty. No, the bombardier spoke up. You did more than duty. You did magic. I don't understand it, but I'm alive because of it. We all are. Other voices joined in, other pilots, other crews, all gathering around the blind radio operator who had guided them through darkness. They wanted to shake his hand, to express gratitude, to understand how he had achieved the impossible. Marcus listened to them all, hearing in their voices a relief of survival, the wonder of witnessing something beyond normal experience, the gratitude of men who had been given back their futures. But Richardson understood something deeper. He pulled Marcus aside, away from the crowd. You know what this means, don't you? Tonight proved that blindness isn't a limitation. Not for this kind of work. You'll be coordinating more missions, training others in your techniques. You've opened a door that was thought to be permanently closed. Marcus nodded slowly. I know, sir, and I'm ready, because every person I guide home is proof that disability is just a word. That limitation is often just lack of imagination, that the human mind can adapt, compensate, exceed expectations when given the chance. The sun climbed higher, warming the air, burning off the morning mist. In the distance, ground crew were already preparing aircraft for the next mission. The war continued, relentless and demanding. But something had changed in that bunker beneath the cliffs of Dover. Something that would ripple outward to the months and years to come. A blind man had seen farther than those with sight, had guided others through darkness because darkness was where he lived, where he thrived, where he had learned to perceive truths invisible to normal eyes. He had proven that the absence of one sense could sharpen others to supernatural precision, that the human spirit could find ways to accomplish the impossible, that heroism wore many faces, and some of them had never seen their own reflection. Marcus Webb turned his face to the sun he had never seen, listened to the sound of aircraft engine preparing for flight, felt the breeze carrying the promise of more nights to come, more missions to fly, more lives to protect. He smiled, a quiet smile of satisfaction and purpose. In a world at war, in the darkest night humanity had ever known, a blind man had become a beacon, not in spite of his blindness, but because of it, because he had learned that true sight had nothing to do with eyes, and everything to do with understanding, perception, and the courage to guide others through their own darkness toward the light. 20 bombers had taken off into an impossible mission. 20 bombers had returned. And in the bunker beneath Dover, a new kind of warfare had been born. One where the blind would lead to seeing, where sound would triumph over sight, where one man's supposed disability would become his greatest strength and his gift to others. The war would continue. More missions would follow. More nights of terror and triumph. But those who had flown with Phantom Wing would never forget the voice in their headphones, steady and sure, guiding them through fire and fear with nothing but sound and an unshakable conviction that the impossible was simply another problem to be solved. Marcus Webb, Lieutenant, Royal Air Force, radio operator, blind since childhood, hero of Operation Phantom Wing. A man who proved that true vision comes not from the eyes, but from the mind, the heart, and the soul. A man who saw with sound, who painted pictures in darkness, who gave sight to those who could not see the path ahead. And as the morning sun climbed higher into a clear English sky, casting light over the airbase and the men who defended freedom, Marcus Webb walked back toward his bunker, his fingers already reaching for his headphones, ready for whatever came next. Because in the darkness of war, someone needed to be the light, and he had learned, finally and completely, that he was that light, not in spite of his blindness, because of it, always because of it.